Marines laughed at his orange rifle until his 5,000-meter shot alerted a general. Every tight-knit group has its legends. In the US Marine Corps, they tell a story about a quiet old man, a garish orange rifle, and a single shot that defied reality. It starts on a blistering day at a firing range, with the sound of laughter. It was sharp, cruel, and aimed at one person. To the young, elite Marines on the line, men armed with the absolute pinnacle of military tech, the old man was a joke. He was a relic. Holding a rifle so bright and offensively orange it was an insult. They saw a civilian who'd wandered onto sacred ground, a grandpa with a toy. They were about to learn that legends don't always make a grand entrance. They were about to see something so impossible it would not only silence their mockery, but send a shockwave all the way up the chain of command. The sun hammered down on 29 Palms, a place where warriors are forged in heat and sand. It was a special day, an exhibition of long-range marksmanship. The best of the best were there, scout snipers and designated marksmen, all young, confident, and brimming with the cocky certainty of youth. They stood around in their desert camo, talking about muzzle velocities, ballistic coefficients, and optics that could practically see into next week. Their rifles were masterpieces of engineering, matte black, desert tan, instruments of precision worth more than a car. He pulled up in a dusty, 20-year-old pickup that seemed to groan as it settled into a spot far from the gleaming tactical vehicles. He was a man in his late 50s, his face a roadmap of a life lived outdoors. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, a stark contrast to the restless energy of the younger guys. To them, he was basically invisible. But then he opened his rifle case. A young corporal, a hotshot sniper with a recent deployment and an ego to match, was the first to spot it. He nudged his squad leader. "Hey, Staff Sergeant, get a load of this." A ripple of snickers spread as Arthur lifted the rifle out. It wasn't black or tan. It was a shocking, unapologetic orange. Not burnt orange, but the loud, vibrant orange of a traffic cone. The rifle itself was an old bolt-action that looked like it had been dragged through hell and back, its stock scarred and worn. The laughter grew. "What in the world is that?" one Marine chuckled. "Did he win that at a carnival?" another chimed in. "The enemy might die of laughter before the bullet gets there." They saw an old-timer who had no business being there, clinging to a piece of junk. Arthur heard the whispers, the open jeers, but his expression never changed. He just walked to his firing lane and set up his station with a methodical grace that went completely unnoticed. He didn't have a fancy tripod or a tablet running ballistic software. He had a simple sandbag, a worn spotting scope, and a small dog-eared notebook. The Marines saw a joke. They had no idea they were looking at a ghost, a man whose real name was a legend, whispered in the highest echelons of special operations. They were laughing at Master Sergeant Arthur Corrigan, and their world was about to be turned upside down. The exhibition kicked off, and the young Marines showed off their incredible skill. They nailed targets at 800 meters, 1,200, then pushed out to a mile. Each hit was met with whoops and hollers. Their high-tech gear gave them every possible advantage against the shimmering heat and fickle desert wind. Through it all, Arthur Corrigan just watched. He hadn't fired a single shot. The range officer, a gunnery sergeant with a chest full of ribbons, walked over. "You planning on shooting today, old man, or just working on your tan?" the gunny asked, his tone laced with doubt. Arthur finally looked up, his pale blue eyes meeting the gunny's. "Just waiting for the right distance, gunny." The gunny raised an eyebrow. "The right distance? We're already at 2,000 meters." Arthur gave a slow nod. "Getting warmer," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. The corporal who'd been leading the mockery sauntered over. "Hey, Pop, need to borrow a real rifle? That thing looks like it might fall apart. Or maybe you need my ballistic calculator. I've got a preset for antique." His friends howled. The insult was direct, a public challenge, but Arthur just turned a page in his notebook and made a small notation with a pencil. He was completely unperturbed. That calm, that unnerving stillness started to have an effect. The laughter faltered. It's one thing to mock a man who reacts. It's another to mock a man who seems to exist on a different plane. They didn't know that the orange paint wasn't a choice. It was a scar. It had been hastily sprayed on during a blinding, zero-visibility sandstorm in Afghanistan. His squad was separated, deafened by the wind, unable to see more than a few feet. The orange rifle became a beacon, a point of reference that allowed his men to find their way back to him, saving their lives. After he retired, his young daughter, scared he might lose the rifle he so cherished, gave it a fresh coat of orange paint to make sure he could always find it. That rifle held the story of his life, of a warrior and a father. But the young Marines saw none of that. They only saw a color that didn't belong. As the day wound down, the Rangemaster's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "All right, Marines, that concludes the scheduled shoot. But for those who want to stick around, we've got one final, unofficial challenge, something to humble you." He paused. "We have a single steel plate set up way out there, 5,000 meters. First, silence. Then, a wave of disbelieving laughter. 5,000 meters, over 3 miles. It was a preposterous distance. According to physics, it's an impossible shot for their rifles. The world record, set with a massive .50 cal rifle, was nowhere near that. The bullet drop would be hundreds of feet. The slightest breeze would send the round 100 yards off target. "That's not a shot, that's an artillery problem," someone yelled, to more laughter. The Rangemaster grinned. "Exactly. No one's expecting a hit. It's just for bragging rights." A few of the cockier Marines stepped up. Their advanced computers couldn't even compute a firing solution. The distance was literally off the charts. They aimed their scopes at an absurd patch of sky and fired. The crack of the rifle, then nothing. Their spotters couldn't see the impact. The bullets were just swallowed by the desert. After 3 Marines failed, the Rangemaster was about to call it a day. "I'll take the shot." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the crowd. Every head turned. It was Arthur Corrigan. The corporal burst out laughing. "You've got to be kidding me. We can't hit it with $500,000 worth of gear, and you think you're going to do it with that thing?" The staff sergeant stepped in. "Sir, with all due respect," he said to the Rangemaster, "don't waste our time. It's an impossible shot." Arthur ignored them. He lay down behind his orange rifle. He wasn't looking at a screen. He pulled a simple 20-year-old wind meter from his pocket, held it up, then put it away. He plucked a single blade of dry grass and let it fall, watching its gentle arc. He was reading the desert itself, using a language no computer could speak. The gunny hesitated, then keyed his mic. "Shooter, the range is yours." The crowd of young Marines gathered, arms crossed and smirks on their faces, ready for the final punchline. This is the moment in the story that separates the pretenders from the legends. An entire crowd of elite warriors has declared the task impossible, and a quiet veteran, with nothing but an old rifle and his experience, is about to defy them all. This is where myths are born. Before we see what happens next, if you believe in the quiet strength of veterans like Arthur, do me a favor and hit that like button. And subscribe, because you're not going to want to miss the fallout from this shot. Arthur settled in, the worn stock fitting into his shoulder like it was a part of him. He wasn't just aiming, he was feeling the world. He could feel the slight rotation of the earth, the Coriolis effect, a factor so minuscule it's ignored at normal ranges, but one that matters over this extreme distance. His mind was the ballistic computer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single, hand-loaded cartridge, chambering it with a smooth click-clack. He didn't aim at the target. He couldn't even see it. He aimed at the sky. His barrel pointed at an insane, graceful arc. He wasn't shooting. He was lobbying a piece of metal on a journey that would last nearly 10 seconds. He closed his eyes. He thought about a sandstorm in Helmand. He thought about his daughter's small hands, carefully painting his rifle, telling him, "So you never get lost, Daddy." This rifle wasn't a tool of death. It was a symbol of coming home. His eyes opened. His breathing slowed. He squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle was a deeper, more resonant thunderclap. A cannon shot. A cloud of dust kicked up around him. And then, the wait. 1 second. 2 seconds. The bullet was climbing to the peak of its long flight. The smug expressions on the Marines' faces were frozen. 3, 4. The bullet was descending, gravity clawing it back to Earth. 5, 6. It was now subsonic, at the mercy of the wind. The corporal started to smirk again. 7 seconds, 8 seconds, and then a sound. Faint, almost imperceptible, travelling back across 3 miles of desert. A high-pitched ping. For a moment, nobody moved. It could have been anything. Then the rangemaster, his face pale, stared at the electronic scoring monitor. A single green light was flashing. Hit. He lifted the radio, his voice trembling. Impact. We have an impact. I repeat, we have a confirmed hit. The silence that followed was absolute. The smirks on the faces of the young Marines evaporated, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. It was impossible. It broke the rules of physics. It was like watching a man flap his arms and fly. The corporal's mouth hung open. He looked from the smoking barrel of the orange rifle to the old man, who was now calmly ejecting the spent casing. He looked at his own, state-of-the-art rifle that had failed, then back at the relic that had just done the impossible. He was realizing that skill wasn't something you could buy or bolt onto a rifle. It was earned in time, sweat, and blood. Arthur slowly got to his feet and began cleaning his rifle as if he'd just finished some routine task. His lack of celebration was more powerful than any boast. For him, this wasn't a miracle. It was just another day at the office. The staff sergeant, a combat leader, walked over to Arthur, his face a mixture of awe and shame. "Sir," he began, the word now loaded with genuine respect. How did you do that?" Arthur paused. "You stop seeing the rifle as a tool," he said calmly. "You stop fighting the wind. You become part of it. The shot is just the last step in a long conversation with the world." He patted the orange stock. "And you learn to trust the things that have brought you home." The lesson hung in the air, more powerful than any training manual. The other Marines drifted closer, no longer a mocking crowd but students at the feet of a master. They looked at the orange rifle not as a joke but as a holy relic. Just then, the rumble of a Humvee broke the quiet. It pulled up and a man with 2 stars on his collar stepped out. Major General Thompson, the base commander. Generals don't just drop by firing ranges. His eyes scanned the scene and fixed on one man. He walked straight past the line of expensive rifles and stopped directly in front of Arthur Corrigan. The young Marines held their breath. Instead of reprimanding him, the general's stern expression softened into profound recognition. "Corrigan?" the general said. "Arthur Corrigan? I'll be damned, it is you!" Arthur looked up. "Hello, Tom." The Marines exchanged confused glances. The general knew him? General Thompson let out a short laugh and turned to the wide-eyed Marines. "Do you men have any idea who this is?" he boomed. No one answered. "This," the general said, pointing at Arthur, "is Master Sergeant Arthur Corrigan, retired. We called him the Ghost of Gardez, a battlefield legend. They say he and a handful of men held off an entire battalion for 3 days. No support, no comms. When we finally got to them, Arthur was the only one on his feet." He pointed to the orange rifle. "And I've heard stories about that rifle, that it glowed in a sandstorm like a beacon, guiding a lost squad back." He looked back at Arthur. "I also heard a rumor I never believed, about a shot you made in the Korengal Valley. An enemy mortar team on an opposing ridge. The range was impossible. They said you lobbed a single 7.62 and took out their spotter. We wrote it off as a legend." The general looked toward the 5,000-meter target on the horizon. "Today," he said quietly, a note of awe in his voice, "I'm starting to think those reports weren't exaggerated." Then, the 2-star general raised his hand and rendered a slow, perfect salute. Not to an officer, but to the retired master sergeant with the orange rifle. Arthur Corrigan, the quiet old man, simply nodded and returned it. The young Marines were no longer looking at an old-timer. They were in the presence of living history. The story of that day became modern Marine Corps folklore, a tale told to new recruits about the old man with the orange rifle who did the impossible.
Meta, pause, secutive. It wasn't just a story about a miraculous shot. It was a story about what it truly means to be a warrior. Those young Marines were never the same. Their arrogance was stripped away, replaced by a deep respect for the generation that came before them. They learned that the measure of a soldier isn't the tech they carry, but the skill they hold in their hands. Arthur Corrigan went home that evening in his old pickup, back to his quiet life. He didn't want medals. His actions had never been for an audience. The orange rifle, once an object of ridicule, became a symbol. It symbolized survival, the bond between a father and child, and a fundamental truth. True legends don't need to boast. Their skill speaks for itself, in a voice as clear and undeniable as the ping of a bullet hitting steel 3 miles away. It serves as a reminder that you should never judge a man by the color of his rifle. What part of this legend resonates with you the most? The impossible shot, the general's salute, or the quiet way he handled the mockery? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. These stories of hidden heroes deserve to be told. For more tales of valor that honor our veterans, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.